Chris Millet, welcome back to the podcast.
Dr. Vargo, thank you for having me again. It's a pleasure.
So, Chris, you were on the podcast, what, maybe a year ago, maybe a year and a half, something like that. And
Yeah.
if anyone wants to go back and search that, very popular episode. And we talked a lot of optical stuff and sales and
Yes.
capture rates and really interesting things that affect every practice. We're gonna pick up on that a little bit today. If you don't mind, though, just for those who aren't aware of you, do you mind just
Yes.
introducing yourself real quick?
Absolutely. So, Chris Millet, Managing Director of Global Sales for Modern Optical. Been in optical sales now for over 30 years. Getting closer to that four in front of it, which is a strange number to say out loud, but have had a chance to work with independent practices in a variety of spaces, spent some time on the lab side, the last 10 years on the frame side. And so really have had a chance to get to know a lot of the practices out there and understand the challenges that they're facing.
And we're going to pick up on that optical sales side, but we're going to attack it from a little different angle this time than we did last time. Chris, as you know, as most people know, that there's a conversation that's been going on in private practice for a long time, and we've had that conversation many times on this podcast on things like selling more premium eyewear and multiple pairs and developing a specialty and differentiating at the high end. And those are all very exciting topics. So today, admittedly, we're going to talk about something a little bit less exciting, but I think very necessary. We're going to try to plug some leaks today. You and I were talking before, and we talked about where are the leaks at in the practice. And I'm talking about patients walking out with their scripts, patients
Yes.
who say, you know what, I'm just going to keep wearing what I have, scratches and all. Or we're going to get into this also, the patient who says, I'm just going to use the same frame, just put some lenses in my frame. And I want to ask you about a specific statistic because you pointed out this statistic to me before, and it's a metric we all track. It's probably one of the more commonly quoted metrics. And if you were to
Yes.
ask me a few years ago, said what's an average capture rate in an optical, I might have said 60%, maybe 70 at the ones doing a great job. Maybe the superstars are hitting 80. You know, those the crazy rock star, but we're now dipping. It's gotten close to 50 and we're dipping below 50%.
Yeah.
So before we dig into solutions for that, help us understand what is going on. What is driving that?
That's a great question. First and foremost, the economy is what it is, right? So we'll talk just 30 seconds about the economy. We're all experiencing some increases. We've had inflation for the last few years. The last 90 days has been extreme increases in certain areas of consumer spending, necessary spending for their household, gas in the car, food on the table, things of that nature. And so, what we're seeing from the consumers is they're responding increasingly with withdrawing or reducing spending in other areas, discretionary areas. No one would ever use the word discretionary to describe eye care needs. But when it does come to the eyeglass portion of healthcare, that's where the consumers are saying, well, I don't know that I need to spend as much on a pair of glasses today. And that's impacting the capture rates. You said it. We're now below 50%. I was reviewing the Q1 data, and the most recent data shows capture rate in the independent market well over 60% for the eye exams. It's like 65, 68% for eye exams. But for the actual purchase of eyeglasses, it was below 50%. And that number, it was one of the first times we've seen that number below 50%. So now we're here, right? So we're under 50%. So what do we do? And so the idea is we now have to really start to attack it strategically and with the right plan.
Chris, do we have any data suggesting that that number for capture rate dipping below 50, whether consumers are taking their script and going elsewhere where they can buy glasses cheaper, or are they just foregoing a new pair of glasses where maybe a few years back that they would have
Yes.
updated their prescription?
So it's a great question. And what we're seeing in the data is two things for sure. Number one, we are seeing an increase in the amount of people spending below $100. This is the consumer's mindset of I spent $100. This is with insurance and without insurance. So they spend under $100. That number continues to be the dominant share in the market. So the market's measures in segments under $100, 100 to 200, and 200 or more. And the two growing curves are 100 and under and 200 and over. So everything in the middle is being compressed, and it's a really small number. So now, where are they spending that? We're not seeing an increase online, but we are seeing an increase in some of the specialty stores. So we've seen the Walmart opticals increase, we've seen the Costco opticals increase, etc. But in terms of the overall, the market is actually shrinking in units. So we did see a decrease in units last year, and we're projected to see another shrink in units this year. So that could impact the independents in two ways. It could impact the independents not only in fewer patients coming to their practice, but also an increased number of those patients choosing to go elsewhere. So it's a double impact for some of the independents.
Do we have any data or even just your anecdotal opinion? How much of this is generational? Because we just did a podcast recently on
Oh,
what does
this is a
Gen Z
fantastic
want?
question.
So I don't mean to put you on the
Yeah.
spot with the data. I'm just genuinely curious. But do we respond differently? Would an optician handle it differently for a 55-year-old that walks in versus a 22-year-old?
Yeah, so if I dip way back into my younger days and analyze what did an average patient in the practice look like, for sure, there's this increased number of patients 40 and above in a private practice and 18 and under. So that 18 to 40, the independent practices historically have lost them to maybe they don't buy glasses, they don't come to the eye doctor as often. But now we're seeing that segment actually go after eye care because of another conversation. They need more correction earlier in their lives. But we're also seeing that first segment, the 40 and 50-year-olds, they're now venturing out, whereas they were historically tied to the independent, whether it be because that was the best place to go for them, it was convenient, or their insurance drove them there. They now have more options. So we're seeing that over 50 crowd start to go to maybe an online. A great example and how that can be measured is if you read the quarterly reports from Warby Parker, they will talk about their ASP, and then they will talk about their increase in progressive sales. Obviously, if you're wearing progressives, you're over a certain age point on average. So Warby Parker was the young person's practice for a while, but now they're dipping into it and they're seeing, for lack of a better term, Dr. Vargo, you and I are starting to step into Warby Parker to experience that with the 20 somethings that are in there. So we are seeing some of the 50-year-olds start to go to some of these practices that we would have segmented as this is the younger generation. But the younger generation themselves has had for the last 5 years, they're not loyal to a brand that we would say we're loyal to. They're not looking for the luxury brands, they're looking for the affordable brands. And that's a buzzword that's really big in today's market is affordable. And I think now that the 50-year-olds are seeing the 20-something-year-olds look good, feel good, and just express that, yeah, this is affordable for me. The 50-year-olds are going, why not? Let me give it a shot. So that's what we're seeing.
It's interesting. You mentioned Warby Parker, and I had actually jotted that down before you even mentioned it.
Mm,
Is that impacting, is it just an affordability play that we're seeing, or are we starting to see trends change where, and I think you alluded to this, but maybe I'll just ask you to expand on it, where a company like Warby comes
yes.
along and they are relatively inexpensive. They're not really cheap, but they've done a good job for the most part branding and marketing and
Yes.
building a brand around it where people look at it and say, hey, I can look good and maybe I don't have to spend a lot of money. And we're probably seeing that combined with the affordability part and the economy that you alluded to in the beginning What I'm asking is, are we getting to a point where people don't necessarily feel like they even have to spend a lot of money to look good? And maybe a backup question there is, does brand matter as much as it used to?
So I'll start with the last piece. Does brand matter? I think what we're recognizing is our definition of brand is changing. So if you're Coca-Cola, your brand stands the test of time, 100 plus years. But now we're seeing, to your point, Warby Parker's, these brands that didn't represent anything. It was a name that was created, but the marketing appeal, the tagline, the background, the story are so important. So I think we need to change what we see as brands because we typically think of brands in three areas: leather goods, uh, perfume, cosmetics, and also sporting gear, right? So those brands are all being impacted. They're all being impacted in a variety of ways by the changing consumer habits, which was the original part of your question. How are consumer habits changing? Number one, how we value where we get um, pleasure, experience, memories, productivity, whatever word you want to use to describe why we're buying what we're buying, it is vastly changing. And much like other cycles in life, we need to understand how that curve is changing and how we come alongside it and actually ride that wave, if you will, because it's going to change again. And so right now, what we're seeing is the word affordable. People want affordable. So we're now coming into the summer season, and obviously this podcast will live on beyond. But what happens now with consumers? Most families, kids are out of school. So where do they want to spend their money? They want to spend their money on a good trip, an experience. So all the data that we've been measuring for the last 6 to 12 months about the consumer mindset, they are migrating to an experience. They're valuing experience more than anything else. So it's not so much about the prestige of the brand, it's the experience the brand can deliver. So here's an easy one in the food segment: In and Out. So if you live on the west side of the country, In and Out, there's lots of In and Outs. It doesn't matter what time of the day or what day of the week you drive past an In and Out, there is an incredible line out there. And people will tell you the experience is one of the things they love about In and Out, but the other piece is the affordability versus, say, insert another fast food chain here. Other fast food chains are experiencing price pressures and decreased number of consumers in the restaurants, whereas In and Out is growing. So it's not a segment eating out, it's the experience of eating out and how do you differentiate. So that's what we're seeing is the changing attitudes. Other companies are trying to provide that experience of an In and Out, but it's different than their brand. So that's what we're seeing when it becomes how are the brands impacting and are they changing their value of brands? It's the experience the brand provides. How does that relate to frames? It's pretty simple. What's my insurance cover? What do I feel I can afford today? What's the experience I'm looking for the frame that I want to wear? What do I want to portray to my friends and my family? And then how will that impact the next year or 18 months of wearing these glasses?
So you make some really good points about changing attitudes and changing expectations. So I think it's fair to say whenever that's the case, we look at how do we change our strategy, right? And somebody told me something once, you don't have to like trends, just don't ignore them. And we're seeing trends change. So I think the common thinking and philosophy in private practice anyway, for as far back as I can remember, is when patients come in, we want to introduce them to the higher end insert, product or service, right? Whatever that is. They just need to be educated. They need to be informed and then they'll spend more money, but then they've got the backup in terms of maybe some budget lines. Is that changing? Are we still maybe from the doctor's standpoint and the opticians and how we train opticians, are we still going for that more premium level sale and then backing down from that? Or do we need to change the strategy and how we approach patients from the beginning?
That's an excellent question. One thing to say right out of the gate is all independents have an advantage over the larger chains, and that is flexibility and the ability to change with speed. So your question about strategy is it is a time to think about the strategy. And for a lot of practices, I heard this phrase years ago from financial investment that a lot of people put money into a 401k with a hope and hold mentality. Just put it in over there, and over time, it'll grow, it'll grow, it'll grow. And so when we think about the strategy and the optical side, a lot of practices for years have been told you got to sell up. You got to sell up. So they've gradually increased the level of brands in their practice. And many practices, by the way, are very successful with that strategy. But I think it's specific to your demographic area. And it's not one that can be applied generically across all demographics and all cities and rural towns. So for those practices that have that boutique look, you're experiencing the upper end of the K economy right now. You've got zero issues that you're really stressed about. But for the bulk of the independents out there, they're experiencing that lower K happening where the middle class and the lower class are challenged with it. So now is the time to take an assessment of your practice dispensary. And a couple of things that we're suggesting to customers today is first and foremost, look at your data with a fresh set of eyes. Take a look at your inventory. How many frames do you have on the board and what's selling? So now we tend to look at things in numbers with a brand. We may say we've got 18 pieces of Gucci, or we've got 22 pieces of Nike, or 38 pieces of a Giovanni di Venezia. And in that scenario, that doesn't tell us the complete story. So now we need to look at is what's selling. And the next piece of what's selling is what's the wholesale retail price. We talked about this a little bit last year about retail pricing strategies. Because when we start to look at what retail customers are buying in the last 6 to 12 months versus 2 or 3 years ago, it will tell a dramatically different story. Because what practices should start to see is the demonstration of that K curve, that they're going to see increases in the luxury brands and they're going to see decreases in the mid-tier brands. But they're also going to see increases in the entry-level brands. And that's confusing to some people. It's like, why are we seeing an increase in all of these $400, $500 frames, but we're also seeing increases $150, $180 retail frames. But everything in the middle is shrinking. That's because those patients are coming in with the funds to spend to say, I can buy a Gucci today. I can buy insert luxury brand here. But the bulk of the people walking in are saying, I don't necessarily know that I want to stretch for that brand this time. I don't know that I need to insert mid-tier brand here. So the strategy should be, let's take a look at what's selling. Let's look at the wholesale price. I've had a lot of conversations with my friends over at GPN and some of the other analytics companies about this piece. And a lot of times it's very difficult to extract that data from the practices, but the practices themselves can run those reports. Show me what my brands are and ask for the wholesale value to understand what's selling. That's step number one. Step number two is then to come together as a group and review that information and talk about some simple strategies to change it. So here's an example. Over the years, this phrase has not changed. How are you doing today, Dr. Vargo? Blah, blah, blah. What are you looking to do today, Dr. Vargo? And Dr. Vargo goes, what does my insurance cover? So the response that we need to dip in today is not to have a negative or a barrier. It's to embrace that and say something along the lines of this. I understand you want to maximize your insurance benefits today. Let me show you some frames that are really affordable and would meet your needs. My definition of affordable is not the same as yours, Dr. Vargo, and it's not the same as someone else's. So it gives the power back to the patient to say, I heard you. You want to be somewhere where you can afford it today. I'm connecting with you, but I can now probe with the customer what's affordable. I can grab one of those expensive frames and I can grab a middle tier frame and I can grab an entry level frame and see how they respond. So that's an approach that we're starting to see that's very successful for practices. Give the patient the power back, connect with them through your verbiage and your training, which is important with the team, and then let the patient choose where they want to be in that. And then once they give you the direction, then give them more selection of that price point, which would mean you would have to have more frames in that segment. So we are suggesting that practices start to take that speed ability, add 30 or 40 pieces to your board in that 150 to 180 retail, because it gives the practice an option. I had an old boss, and he would say, you don't deposit percentages in the bank, you deposit dollars. And I think sometimes we get stuck on the margins too much. We talked about that in the retail strategy. And so we think the only way I can make money off this insurance patient is to sell them a $400 frame. Well, if you sell them 0 frames, you made $0, but your margin is intact. So that's good news. So if you sell them a $150 to $180 retail frame and you only make $30 or $40, that's $30 or $40 more in your account today during this short period of economic times. And when they come back, the patient will probably move up again.
This is something we're definitely hearing more. So we have at IDOC, we have these study group dinners across the country. We do them every quarter. You've
Mm-hmm.
probably been involved somewhere along the way with
Yes.
the study group dinners. And the topic this most recent quarter was around this topic, optical sales. And if I go back a couple years, we would hear a lot more from the private practice crowd. Oh, I don't sell that cheap garbage in my practice. I just sell
Mm-hmm.
high end and we just educate them on why it's better quality. And it's interesting because I'm hearing those conversations now shifting, where a lot of
Mm-hmm.
those same doctors are saying they're not buying them like they used to. More and more
Yes.
people are struggling. They don't have the discretionary income. They're walking out. And so they're feeling it. I'm like, well, if you guys are feeling it, then yeah, if we look demographically at more of the middle, the markets that won't support the high end as much. And by all means, if you can make that work in your market and that works for your brand,
Yes.
go for it. I think somebody out there right now is buying a $50,000 watch. Um,
Right.
but when we look at the reality of where your practice is, the demographics, the economics, and making sure that you've got a viable business model, the conversation is shifting. Something else I'll hear, Chris, I'm curious your feedback is we lose people sometimes because they just assume we're expensive. Now you're talking about
Yes.
strategies internally. Now you may
Yes.
know it as the doctor, your staff may know it because you had a meeting about it, but how does the patient know it? Do we need to be more proactive from the beginning? And oh my gosh, does the doctor need to have some conversations with the patient? Because if they never get, a great way to not sell a pair of glasses, make sure the patient never gets to the optical. So, and I know no doctor out there wants to have
No.
a conversation about product or price or anything like that, but it is a problem. People will say, well, they don't even get to the optical because they just assume we're too expensive and they're going to go to, XYZ big box or retail or the internet.
Yeah, I think that has been a challenge for a lot of practices because people, if we look at the average length of time in between exams and eyeglasses, that plays into the mentality because it's not something that the patient does weekly. They get gas weekly. They go to the grocery store weekly. They go to the dental clinic once every 6 months, right? So that experience is more top of mind. So when they're planning their eye exam, to your point, the first thing they do is think about, well, when I got a new pair of glasses, it cost me XYZ. And it might have been, if we go back in time, 23, 24, and the world was a vastly different place. Americans on average had more disposable income. It was one of the best periods of spending on glasses was in that 22, 23, 24 range before we started to see a change. So they might have spent five, six, 800, $1,000 out of pocket for a pair of glasses. But to your point, now they're coming back and it's June, July, August, October of 2026. And they're going, no, wait a second, I can't spend $1,000. So I think part of that strategy also is to address some of these things ahead of time with the patient with some simple marketing blurbs, letting them know we're welcoming you back and we have lots of affordable options for you with our glasses. Capitalizing it again on the consumer mindset of, okay, so that takes a little stress off. And then when they get into the practice, encouraging them to, one of the things we talked about last year, and I repeat it again, is instead of sitting in the waiting room, taking that time to catch up on your Instagram or your Twitter feed, walk over to the optical, have the optician take a look at the glasses and inspect them, clean them and give them back to the patient, and then ask them to take a look add a few things on in the room while they're cleaning the glasses, and then have them go sit back down. So it creates the connection with the optician. And we know most people don't want to be rude. They don't want to say out loud, they don't want to spend a lot of money. They just want to say thank you and leave. But when they have that connection, now the optician, whoever is working with the patient, will see them and then say, Dr. Vargo, ready to look at some new glasses? And then Dr. Vargo can now feel like, yes, I want to, because I feel that connection, or no, I can't today. And typically they'll say, I'm out of time. That's the typical word for, I just don't have time. I got to get back to work. That we hear the phrase instead of, I don't really want to buy a pair of glasses today. I can't afford it. So, but it is a challenge because the memory of the previous pair of glasses. So we have to overcome that. We have to overcome that piece.
Yeah, and it's a tough ask sometimes when somebody's already made their mind up when they walk in the door that they're going to get the exam there because they like the doctor, they like the staff, but they're going to go somewhere else because, quote unquote, the glasses are cheaper. So we have a small window to change their mind. Their mind can be changed, whether that's through a better understanding.
Yes.
I think that practices need to be more proactive in this way and not just,
Yes.
I like to say, don't give up so quick on your patient. But if they come in and they're not given any reason to step out into that optical, whether
Mhm.
it's, and a lot of that is just understanding what's important to them. If style is everything to them and we're trying to sell them on spring hinges, we're not connecting with them, right? So understanding that can come in pre-testing, it can come through the doctor, and getting them a little bit excited to go out there and at least look. Again, if we don't get them in the optical, they don't look. Great way to not sell a pair of glasses. But that's maybe a topic for our next conversation. How do we communicate better throughout the process? But I have one. I was mentioning the study group dinners and the feedback I got from one doctor, which I thought was great. I don't know if every practice would do this approach or not, but it was pretty proactive. When they've got the patient at the end who's saying, I'm just going to take my script and go somewhere else, the staff is actually trained to ask politely, non-invasively, do you mind if I ask where you're planning to look at glasses at? And a lot of times they'll get an answer, and they've done the research to find out what the ranges are from the place that they're thinking about going. And they'll say, well, you're going to spend about X $100 there. We've done the research. If we could get you into something in that budget, would you be open to looking what we have? And they've saved a lot of sales that way. So I think strategically,
Yes.
just looking at things that are more, maybe a little bit more proactive um, than you've done in the past, but to keep the patient in the office.
I love that story. I'll give you another example of being proactive in a demonstration way. I visited a practice down in Texas, and the customer, um, beautiful dispensary. Walk in, all branded product as you come into the dispensary, and as you move around to the final dispensing table, behind that dispensing table was a board of frames, probably about 90 frames on display. And above the display was a sign that said $149 pair of glasses. So now, from a visual, if you sit down at that desk at the end, you're going to look up and you're going to see that. Now, most doctors would fret and go, I don't want them to see that, especially if they chose insert expensive brand over here at the last resort. But it now gives you the opportunity to either say to the patient, if you're looking for a second pair, I've got something for you right now, or to that patient that says, I don't know that it's kind of expensive. As they're looking through the practice dispensary, they will see that number. This is a common practice in most retail places. Prices are on display. The average optical practice, prices are hidden. They're really difficult. They're on a little tag. Maybe they're written in ink pen on the demo lens, but there's not a real true display of prices of frames. And we do that purposely because we feel like, if we tell them what it's going to be, they won't buy it. Consumers are a lot smarter than that. The research shows they're looking at frames at the highest rate before they arrive at the practice. They can see prices online. They're really smart and sophisticated. There's nice software that can tell them that. So let's not be afraid of price. Let's actually show them price, and then you will get that opportunity. And in terms of showing them price, we need to start planting seeds throughout the year. Think about the messages that you get bombarded with in other areas of your life that tell you a price. They may not get you today with that price, but they've planted the seed when you're ready. So, as an example, I mentioned to you we're moving, and so if you're buying furniture, there's generally 2 or 3 times a year is the best time to buy furniture. Memorial Day, Labor Day, all these major holidays. So if you buy a piece of furniture during that time, you get the best savings. So we need to start planting those seeds with customers as well. That throughout the year, let's send them a message. Hey, we've got great sunglass specials. Hey, we've got back to school specials. So they start to hear that, my practice does have price affordable options. And when they come in, they can seek those options or they can look for what fits their budget and their look best at that time.
It's interesting because I was doing some of the research, especially with the younger generation, on what they want. And one of the things that came up right near the top is transparency of pricing
Yes.
because they have so much access to it. We're not used to seeing it all the time. And for forever, what did optometrists do is if they had the price at all on the glasses, it was on that little tag in tiny
Right.
little writing and just conveniently flipped around the wrong way so nobody could see it.
Right.
And
Right.
now, especially the younger generation, is really looking, almost needs it, that transparency of pricing and making the transaction very simple. It almost sounds like something is getting reversed here. And again, it seemed like the old model was aim high, right? Lead with
Yes.
the premium, the expensive, and then go down if you need to. But situationally, I don't want to overgeneralize this, but depending on the patient, the demographic, the practice, maybe we need to rethink this and get them in the door with that lower offer. And then, like a lot of things, you've bought a car before, that starting at, we had a home built
Yes.
once, and it's like, starting at, and like you could have a
Yes.
home bill for $180 and then
Right.
and then they just and then the prices is I'm joking obviously, but you start adding things on. But if you just get them interested, and then from there find out what they need, what are they interested in, and would they want to
Yes.
invest more in their vision. We've all done it. We've all gone in someplace and said, I'm just going to get the base model, right? But then it could
Yes.
have been a computer, but then the a salesperson, a rep, started talking to us, finding out what we wanted, what we needed, what was important to us, and said, for a little bit more, you can get this and you can get this. Now we're seeing the value. But it seems like the approach is flipped on its head a bit. Instead of scaring them off with the high price, we're
Yes.
looking at getting them in the door with I don't want to say cheap, but the lower price, and then building on from there. Would that be fair to say?
That's a great strategy. And this is the strategy that we're actually seeing from some of the online retailers as well as the affordable brick and mortar locations. When we look at multiple pair sales, right? So that's something you mentioned early on that we talk a lot about multiple pair sales because we've had this mindset that we've got to take the initial pair of glasses to the mountain peak, right? If we can collect $1,000 out of pocket, we can stay in business mindset. Whereas those practices or those business entities goes, okay, so if I can get them to spend 150 on 3 pair of glasses, my overall margin is better than getting them to spend $1,000 on 1 pair. And that is very true when it comes to managed care because there's a lot of write-offs on the back end. There's this different options. Like you may collect $180 for a lens add-on or progressive add-on, but you're not making $180 profit. It gets cut greater than 50%. So there is a strategy that says, especially for managed care for independents, get them into something affordable, sell them a second pair where you control 100% of the margin. So if you even, and this is going to be heresy coming from a frame guy, but if you get them to use their insurance on, say, contact lenses, get that annual supply on contact lenses, but then get them to get the specialty pair of glasses. Get that pair of glasses when you've overextended the use of your contact lens and you need your eyes to be healthy. Get that pair of glasses when you may lose your contact lens and you need to read. Get that pair of glasses that you need to sit at the dresser at night so you can sit in bed and go through your Twitter feed, your Instagram, and your TikTok videos, right? All those different things. Myself sitting here at my desk, I've got 3 screens, 2 behind this one. I interchange between my everyday and my computer lenses because it helps my visual needs. So there is something to be said that we don't need to get them to spend $1,000 out of pocket on 1 pair of glasses. We can actually get them to spend 300 or 400 each time on a pair of glasses. And when you add up that 1,000, your margin is actually better. And your true net dollars deposited better than just the one pair of glasses. And we're seeing those numbers play out. So I was looking at the data this morning, and it says 64% of the time in independence, a patient buys one pair of glasses. Whereas in these online, it's in the 30s. So that means 60 plus percent of the time, they're getting them to buy multiple pairs of glasses. And so we're seeing that strategy as well play out. There are opticals that were really big back in the 80s that are making a comeback, the multiple pair, buy two, four. We're seeing that segment start to grow again. It shrunk for a long period of time, but now it's starting to come back. Again, demonstrating that a strategy is we need to get them in multiple pairs of glasses, and they don't need to all be $1,000 pair of glasses.
Chris, I got one more question. You hit on something before about lifestyle
Mhm.
and people wanting to spend more discretionary money. Is there any tie-in with glasses with that? Or am I just when you look at things like hunting, skiing, fishing, I don't even know if that's where you're going with lifestyle, but the glasses that you wear can factor into that. And maybe it's the second pair, but that's what's exciting people. Is there any tie-in with that? Or would it just make for an interesting conversation to have with somebody who's really into golfing or fishing? But I'm just curious if the glasses could be a tie-in to something that would improve their lifestyle. And would that be something that they would be open to discussing, or is that just, glasses are still, they're going to see that as something that they don't have the money for because they want to go on vacation?
Well, for sure, we're seeing lifestyle choices when it comes to sunglasses, right? So for you can look at all the major brands out there, um, and there's a lot of sales in sunglasses by brand, and it's tied to a type of life experience. So if you're a fisherman, you're loyal to this brand. If you're a boater, you're loyal to this brand. If you're a sport water person or a hunter, you might be loyal to this brand. So there's definitely some connection between lifestyle and sunglasses. But when it comes outside of sunglasses into just everyday pair of glasses, we're not really seeing an association of lifestyle. What we are seeing though is this connection between visual needs with affordability. And I'll go back to that example that I mentioned a few minutes ago of myself needing the computer pair of glasses. So we're seeing for the first time in a long time recognition um, that you need more than one pair of glasses. One pair of glasses does not meet the entire visual system. And so we are seeing that from a perspective. But where the patients are actually going to make those choices more often are the online options because they're affordable. And that's going back to a lifestyle question. The dot that I would connect for practices is create a package that's affordable for these lifestyle options. Advertise the price. Don't run away from it. Advertise that you have custom readers in your practice for $49. I'll just say this out loud. We sell $5 frames to eye doc members today. And so you can get a very inexpensive frame from us, pair that with lenses if you're edging in house or one of your lab partners out there to give them an option for a single vision reader to put at their desk, put it at their nightstand. That's an easy example of a lifestyle option that practices can be doing right now to take advantage of that piece. And next is the other wave. What are you doing for kids with gaming? Those types of options. The highest seller of blue light lenses are online retailers because they advertise consistently at these gaming sites and through the different websites where gamers are going. And so they're being bombarded with this message that you need a blue light filter, you need a blue light filter. So their blue light sales are through the roof. But if you come to the private practice, we're barely scratching the surface in that area. So that's an example of another lifestyle choice that's taking root with younger people, but not being realized by the independent channel today.
Well, thank you so much. This is
You're welcome.
excellent conversation. And I think what we're talking about here to anyone listening is just really taking an honest look at your practice, taking an honest look at your business model, and asking a fair question. Am I running the practice that I wish I had, or am I running the practice I actually have? And I think you just have to be honest with that. And look at your numbers, look at your data. If what you're doing is working, is the data supporting it? But it's something that I've been hearing for a while, at least in the past year, as the economy has changed and more people are feeling it, the more pushback from patients. And I'm glad we were able to have this honest conversation about it. And maybe some people can look at their model and say, well, maybe I need to make some adjustments for things that aren't working as maybe like they did a few years ago.
Yes. Dr. Vargo, thank you so much for the time. I so appreciate it. And just want to say to all the doctors out there, Modern Optical would love to work with you, answer questions, and help support. We've got a fantastic team. Obviously, we have a lot of products that can meet this affordable side. And it's just a conversation. We would love to chat with them and help them with their strategy. Whether they do business with Modern or not is not important. It's how can we help their business thrive in this time. So thank you for your time today, Dr. Vargo.
Chris, how can people find out more about Modern, or who would they reach out to?
Absolutely. So first and foremost, if they actually go to the iDoc website, they will see our information on there. There's an email that they can reach out to and a phone number, but they can simply contact us directly on our phone line at 1-800-323-2409. Modernoptical.com is our website. And if you go to the modernoptical.com website, you can locate on that website a contact us and then fill in the information that comes directly into our customer service team. And we immediately respond back out to those customers directly through their choice. So we'll ask them, do you want an email or a phone call? So we'll respond to them in kind as what they need.
Awesome. Well, thanks again. You guys have been great partners. Really appreciate that and really appreciate you taking the time to talk to us.
Dr. Vargo, thank you for your time and thank you for the support from the organization. We really appreciate it.
Well, thanks to Chris and thanks everyone for listening. We'll see you in the next episode.